All right, Rogue, it's time to do book club. You gonna wake up, buddy? Kitty, kitty, kitty. Rogue. It's time for Rogue's Reads. I don't know if he's gonna wake up. Oh, there he is. No, nope. Too late. He went back to sleep. All right, well, good afternoon. I'm Renee, the Children's Librarian at Salem Public Library in Salem, Ohio. And say Rogue's up there. Daisy Ray is right here. Also taking a nap. Griffin's over there. Hi, Griff. He was in the sun, but the sun moved on him. How dare it. Now we get the camera set up here. Okay, so, Rogue's Reads. This is our virtual book club for kids in 4th to 8th grade. We are reading The Genius Files by Dan Gutman. And we are on book 2, Never Say Genius. This book is available on Hoopla, so go get yourself a copy, digital copy of it, so you can read right along with me. So where did we leave off yesterday? Oh, thanks to Dan Gutman and HarperCollins Publishing for allowing us to share these books this way. So yesterday when we left off, we had a pretty exciting time at Wrigley Field in Chicago, where Mrs. Higgins showed up and told the kids that there was a bomb in the dugout, and they got the game forfeited, and then had to pretty much run for their lives from all the angry Cubs fans. So we're gonna get caught up with them and see what they are up to. And there was another cipher at the that came up on the scoreboard, like under the thing after it said it was their birthday. So Dr. Warsaw or Archie Clark, somebody is still out there and still after them. All right, Rogue's got to groom his face. Apparently his ears are dirty. Hey, why don't you come down here and do book club with me? He'd rather get scratched. All right, chapter 7, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Coke frantically pulled the t-shirt over his head and angrily stuffed it into a garbage can. Stupid, 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 he muttered. How could we have been so stupid as to trust that lady? Mrs. Higgins is insane. She always has been. I should have known. I really thought she'd changed, Pep said as she put her Cubs shirt into the same trash can. She seemed so sad when she was talking about Dr. Warsaw, and she sounded so sincere when she was telling us how unhappy she was working as a paid assassin. Sincere? Coke sputtered. She played us for fools. Do you think she was really in love with Dr. Warsaw? Do you think she was really going to marry him? Pep asked. Or was that a lie too? Who knows, Coke replied. The two of them were made for each other. They're both psychos. The twins debated whether or not Mrs. Higgins could be working together with Archie Clone, but they were interrupted when Coke's cell phone rang. As expected, it was their dad. Are you kids okay? Dr. McDonald asked urgently. Why did you say there was a bomb in the Cubs' dugout? Are you crazy? Yes, we're okay, Coke replied. I don't know why we said there was a bomb in the Cubs' dugout. Maybe we are crazy. Dr. McDonald instructed the twins to meet him at a parking lot on North Sheffield Avenue and hung up abruptly. It took the twins a while to retrace their steps and find the location. When they did, their father was leaning against the side of the RV, hands on hips. Never a good sign. If it was so important for you to leave the game early, you could have just said so, Dr. McDonald said sternly. You didn't have to have them evacuate the whole ballpark. That wasn't it, Dad. Really? We would never do something like that, Pep replied. Then why did you do it? Pep looked at her brother, who was always better in situations like this. Dad, he began, would you believe me if I said our health teacher, Mrs. Higgins, works for the Cubs now, and she told us that singing the last line of Take Me Out to the Ball Game would trigger a bomb in the Cubs dugout? Dad, she put a gun to our heads and forced us to sing it. No, said Dr. McDonald, I wouldn't believe that. What if we told you it was a chocolate gun, added Pep. That was a very dangerous stunt, their father scolded them. People could have been killed running for the exits like that. But if there really was a bomb in the Cubs dugout, Coke explained, people really would have been killed. But there was no bomb in the dugout, Dr. McDonald shouted. You did it for no reason at all. He shook his head and he pinched the bridge of his nose between two fingers, just like that. Which is what parents do for some reason when their kids do incomprehensibly dumb things. They climbed into the RV and headed downtown on Michigan Avenue, where Mrs. McDonald had arranged to meet them. She was waiting when they pulled over to the curb across the street from Millennium Park. "So how was the game?" Mrs. McDonald said cheerfully as she climbed into the front seat with shopping bag. None of them, not even Dr. McDonald, particularly wanted to go over what had happened at Wrigley Field. "It was very exciting, Mom," Coke finally said. "That must have been cool seeing your names up on the video screen," Mrs. McDonald said. "Was it fun singing Take Me Out to the Ball Game?" "That was my idea." "It was a unique experience, Mom," Pep said diplomatically. Dr. McDonald shook his head slightly and snorted to himself as he put the RV in gear. The streets were busy, but he managed to merge onto Lakeshore Drive and the Chicago Skyway, Route 90. It was late afternoon by this time. Mrs. McDonald punched their location into the GPS. She did some rough calculations in her head as they left Chicago. It was June 26th. They were about 700 miles from Washington, and they hoped to get there at least one day early to explore the capital before Aunt Judy's wedding on July 4th. So they had about 7 days to travel 700 miles, about 100 miles a day. That was reasonable. They were making good time, and Dr. McDonald relaxed a little behind the wheel, brainstorming about his next book. "Maybe I should write a biography," he said to himself. "I've never done a biography. I could write about a historical figure, maybe a president. People like to read biographies of presidents." Dr. and Mrs. McDonald were both thankful that up until this point they hadn't encountered any of the typical road trip calamities. Lost wallets, mechanical failures, kids getting poison ivy, and so on. Little did they know that so far their children had been forced to jump off a cliff, locked in a burning school, pushed into a sandpit, thrown into a vat of Spam, zapped with electric shocks, lowered into boiling oil, and chased through the streets of Chicago by enraged Cub fans. Dr. McDonald knocked wood, well, the dashboard anyway, and reached into the glove compartment to put on a CD, Michael Jackson's Number Ones. There was little the whole family could agree on, especially when it came to music. But after Michael Jackson died, they had all gone to see his concert film, This Is It. By the time the movie was over, the McDonalds had become Jackson fans. Foreheads were bobbing together when the first notes to Don't Stop Till You Get Enough pumped out of the RV speakers. "Oh, I almost forgot," Mrs. McDonald said suddenly. "I got you kids souvenirs." She opened her shopping bag and pulled out a Cubs shirt for each of the twins. They immediately flipped them over to see if there was any writing on the back. "Thanks, Mom," Coke and Pep said together. "I thought these would help you remember your day at Wrigley Field," Mrs. McDonald said. "Oh, we'll remember our day at Wrigley Field," Pep said. "I'm sure of that." They continued along Route 90 for a few miles when at the same time all four spotted a sign at the side of the road. "Welcome to Indiana, Crossroads of America, Lincoln's boyhood home." "Woohoo!" Coke yelled. "Hey, did you know that 5 vice presidents were born in Indiana?" "How can you possibly know that?" asked Pep. "I read it on the placemat in a restaurant when we were in Wyoming," Coke said. "In fact, Indiana is nicknamed Mother of Vice Presidents." "You're laboring under the misconception that anybody cares," Pep said. The McDonalds couldn't see it, but they were only a mile from Lake Michigan at this time. Billie Jean pumped out of the RV speakers as Dr. McDonald pulled off Route 90 at exit 14B. The sign said Gary. He drove a couple of miles through this busy working-class city before the kids noticed they were no longer on the highway. "What are we doing here?" Coke asked. "Do either of you know what Gary, Indiana is famous for?" asked Mrs. McDonald. "I do," Pep said excitedly. She began to sing that old song from the Music Man that consists mainly of the words Gary, Indiana, repeated over and over again. If you don't believe me, YouTube it. There's your activity for today. "Nope, that's not it," Dr. McDonald said as he turned onto a street filled with very small houses. "Guess again." "I give up," Coke said. The RV stopped in front of a simple little house with white siding and a dark shingled roof. "Look at the street sign on the corner," Mrs. McDonald said. And the sign said 2300 Jackson Street in one direction and Jackson Family Boulevard in the other. "Beat It" was pumping out of the RV speakers. "This is Michael Jackson's house!" Pep yelled. "That's right," Mrs. McDonald said. "It's his boyhood home." And only then did the kids notice a few stuffed animals and flowers that fans had left near the front door. Mrs. McDonald rolled down the window and snapped a few photos. "Weren't there something like 10 brothers and sisters in the Jackson family?" Coke asked. "And they all lived in this tiny little house?" 9, Mrs. McDonald said. "The family moved to California when Michael was 11. "Is this a museum or something?" Pep asked. "Can we go inside?" "No, somebody lives here," Dr. McDonald said. But this is like going to Graceland if you're an Elvis fan, Mrs. McDonald explained. Like going to Liverpool if you're a Beatles fan. Like going to Hoboken if you're a Sinatra fan. Hoboken? Coke asked. What's that? What's a Sinatra? Asked Pep. Forget it. They listened to Thriller as they headed back onto the highway. Just 10 miles east of Gary, they pulled into Yogi Bear's Jellystone Park Camp Resort in Portage, Indiana. Mrs. McDonald had called ahead on her cell phone and made a reservation. Dr. McDonald hooked up the RV to the camp's electrical system while the others pitched in to prepare dinner, frozen chicken and vegetables. Afterward, there was a campfire going on, and the kids went over to toast some marshmallows. While they were sitting there, sticks in the fire, Coke was thinking about what had happened that day, and he suddenly remembered something. Back at Wrigley Field, right after their birthday message flashed up on the video screen, it had been replaced by another message. He'd almost forgotten about it, but his brain had somehow memorized the message itself. Pep ran back to the RV to get her notebook so they could write it down and figure it out. All right, here's the cipher. It looks like it might be some ancient picture language, Coke asked, like something the Aztecs used or the Egyptians. Or each of those symbols might represent a letter of the alphabet, Pep said. Using the flickering light from the campfire, Pep puzzled over the strange symbols for a long time while Coke toasted more marshmallows. He had no patience for cipher or puzzles, or any of that spy stuff his sister loved so much. There were 14 symbols, and numbers 1 and 10 were the same. None of the others were repeated. Pep turned it upside down and sideways, trying to get a different perspective on it. The dots had to be important, or they wouldn't be there. After a half hour or so, Pep called it quits. It was late, the fire was dying out, and it was getting hard to see the notebook. They were both tired. Most of the people staying at the campground had gone to sleep. She could work on it some more the next day. That's the end of the chapter. Let me take a look here. Ooh, this next chapter is... What's our time looking like? Oh, I think we're okay. Grab a drink of water. Okay, chapter 8, Cruising Indiana. As it turned out, Pep didn't have to work on the cipher the next day at all. While she was sleeping, her unconscious mind was working feverishly on the problem. The brain has a funny way of doing that. It never sleeps. And when Pep woke up in the morning, the solution was waiting for her. "It's in Pigpen," she whispered to her brother, who was still sleeping peacefully. "Huh?" he muttered. "What?" "That cipher we saw on the video screen at Wrigley Field yesterday," she whispered. "It's written in a code called Pigpen. I learned about it in Girl Scouts when I was little. They used it back in the 18th century to keep messages private." "Whatever you say," Coke said, wiping his eyes. Their parents were still asleep. Pep got out her notebook and explained to Coke how the code worked. "Each of those symbols represents one letter, but we have to make a pigpen grid to find out what the letters are. Let me see if I still remember how to make the grid." So she turned to the page with the cipher, and then directly below it, she wrote out a pigpen grid as she remembered it. I don't know anything about this type of a pigpen grid. It's certainly not something I learned in Girl Scouts, but it's actually really cool. I think that can be another activity for today. Research pigpen coding and see if you can write a message in it. So look, the first symbol represents the letter T, Pep whispered. "See?" And Coke scanned the grid and saw that the little box with the T inside of it matched the first symbol of the cipher. "So that would mean that the second letter has to be W," he whispered. "Right," replied Pep, "and the third letter is O, so that's probably the first word of the message, too." After that, they were easily able to figure out the rest of the letters one by one. PM, July 3rd. 2 o'clock in the afternoon on July 3rd, Pep whispered excitedly. "That's the message!" Coke looked at his cell phone to check the date, June 27th. "July 3rd is 6 days from now," he said, counting them off. "Something is going to happen at 2 o'clock on July 3rd. But that just tells us when," Coke whispered. "It doesn't tell us what's going to happen or where." "Aunt Judy's wedding will be the next day on July 4th, Pep said. "We'll have to be in Washington by then, and Dad said he wants to get there early, so we're sure to be in Washington on July 3rd. "That doesn't help us much," said Coke. "Washington's a big city." "What are you two whispering about?" Dr. McDonald suddenly called out. "Nothing, Dad," Coke said. "Go back to sleep." After everyone was awake, bathed, and breakfasted, the grown-ups huddled at the picnic table, poring over the laptop screen and road atlas. "Family meeting," Dr. McDonald announced, gathering everyone around him. "We have a big day ahead of us. My goal is to get across the great state of Indiana." Dr. Ben McDonald was the kind of person who liked to set goals and achieve them. It gave him a feeling of satisfaction to cross things off his to-do list, and he tried to communicate the importance of setting goals to his children. The plan for the day was to drive about 150 miles across northern Indiana, hitting 5 or 6 sites along the way that Mrs. McDonald could use an amazing but true. They would start out on Route 80, which almost touches the Michigan border. At a certain point, they would veer off to visit some of the interesting sites south of the highway. He and Mrs. McDonald had mapped out the route carefully so they would stop at some historical sites for him, some offbeat sites for her, and also some sites that would keep the kids interested. "Okay," Mrs. McDonald said. "First, let's go over the places we are not going to visit today. We are not going to see the world's largest toilet bowl in Columbus, Indiana." "Oh, man," Coke complained. "I really wanted to go there in more ways than one." "Very funny," Pep said. "It's 200 miles south of here, and we're heading east," Dr. McDonald explained. "There's a 20-foot statue of a woman made out of hubcaps in Jeffersonville," Mrs. McDonald continued, "but that's even further south. And as much as I would love to see the world's largest ball of paint, it would be a 3-hour drive to Alexandria." "How big is the ball of paint?" Pep asked. "It's over 3,000 pounds, Mrs. McDonald said, consulting her guidebook. "Oh, and the world's largest hairball is not far from here. It's bigger than a basketball." I think it's just Daisy Ray. Especially since she hasn't got a haircut in forever. She is definitely turning into a hairball. "Oh, let's go," Coke shouted. "It's not on display anymore," Mrs. McDonald said. "Bummer. How was it possible for a cat to cough up a hairball bigger than a basketball, Mom?" Pep asked. "It must have been a very large cat," Coke guessed. "It was a cow," Mrs. McDonald said. "Oh." "The Santa Claus Museum in Santa Claus, Indiana would be a 5-hour drive," Dr. McDonald informed everyone, "and I refuse to go to Jones, Michigan, where your mother tells me there is a fake ghost town created by the guy who invented kitty litter. You'll just have to come back on another trip to see those places, preferably after I'm dead." "So where are we going today?" asked Pep. "Our first stop is the Lunquarium, Mrs. McDonald replied. "The what?" They checked out of the campground and headed east for about an hour on Route 80. Then Dr. McDonald pulled off of exit 83, and a mile or so down the road, a sign came into view. "Welcome to Pure Michigan." "Michigan?" Pep asked. "What are we doing here, Dad? I thought you said we were going to cross Indiana today." "We are," Dr. McDonald replied. "This is just a quick side trip." "Woohoo!" Coke hollered. "Did you know that Michigan is sometimes called the Wolverine State, even though there are no Wolverines in Michigan anymore?" "Get a life, Brainiac," Pep told her brother. Soon they arrived in Edwardsburg, which bills itself as the live bait capital of the world. Like worms? Ew. Dr. McDonald pulled the RV into the big parking lot of a store called Lunker's. There was a giant rotating fish on the roof. "I don't get it," Coke said as they walked through the front door. "It's a big fishing store." But actually it was much more. The ceiling of the store was painted blue with white clouds to make it seem like you were in the great outdoors. Besides all the fishing and hunting gear, the store featured a stuffed bear, an alligator, some huge iguanas, an enormous aquarium, the Lunquarium, and an 8,000-pound sculpture of a bass that looked like it was crashing through a brick wall. That's a big bass. Even Coke had to admit the place was cool. Everybody had pretzels at the in-store restaurant before piling back into the RV. "Okay, what's next, Mom?" asked Pep. "Our next stop is the RV Hall of Fame," Mrs. McDonald announced. "No," Coke hollered. "It can't be true. They can't have a Hall of Fame devoted to RVs. Say it ain't so, Dad." But it was so. In Elkhart, Indiana, just 11 miles south of Lunker's, is the RV Hall of Fame, and Mrs. McDonald read from the website, dedicated to preserving the history and honoring the pioneers and individuals who have made significant contributions to the RV and manufactured housing industries. "Boring," Coke shouted. Please, Mom, Pep begged. Don't make us go there. We'll go anywhere else you want. Just don't make us go there. Okay, Mrs. McDonald agreed. Stay on the road, Ben. We'll skip the RV Hall of Fame. In the back, Coke and Pep sighed breaths of relief. They weren't sure if they would rather jump off a cliff, get locked in a burning building, or visit the RV Hall of Fame. All the weird things they've seen, I think that's what I'd probably want to skip to. Next stop, Mrs. McDonald announced cheerfully, the world's largest egg. It may be hard to believe, dear reader, but about an hour south of the RV Hall of Fame, in the little town of Mentone, Indiana, rests the largest egg in the world. Well, it's not a real egg, and it may not even be the largest fake egg in the world, because there are other fake eggs in Washington State and Canada that locals claim to be the largest. But if you walk down Main Street in Mentone, you will almost surely see a 3,000-pound, 10-foot tall concrete egg standing on its end near a bank parking lot. The twins were not in a position to beg off going to look at the giant egg, as they'd already talked their parents into skipping the RV Hall of Fame. One should choose one's battles carefully. This is it? Dr. McDonald asked as he walked up to the egg, somewhat disappointed. What do you mean, Ben? The easily impressed Mrs. McDonald enthused. This is amazing! How many people can say they saw the largest egg in the world in person? Dr. McDonald shook his head and went back to wait for the rest of the family in the RV. It's really not that big, Mom, Pep said, and it's not even an egg. It's an egg-shaped object. Oh, excuse me. I don't think this egg is as big as the world's largest ball of twine, Coke noted. You're comparing apples and oranges, Mrs. McDonald told him. No, I'm not, Coke said. I'm comparing balls of twine and fake eggs. If you want me to compare the world's largest apple and the world's largest orange, Mrs. McDonald ignored him, taking some photos and notes for her website. It's probably bigger than that hairball you told us about, Pep guessed, hoping to make her mother feel like it hadn't been a wasted trip. I can't believe we passed up the world's largest toilet bowl to see this, Coke complained. Let's blow this pop stand. So they did. There's only so much time you can spend looking at a gigantic concrete egg. What's next, Mom? Asked Pep as they drove out of Mentone. Oh, you're going to like this, she replied mysteriously. I don't know. Their mom picks out some weird stuff. 30 miles directly south of Mentone on the banks of the Wabash River is the town of Peru, Indiana. Peru is called the circus capital of the world because it used to be the winter home of Ringling Brothers and other circuses. But the McDonald family didn't come to Peru to see lions or tigers or bears. They came to see a pair of pants. Do you kids remember a couple of days ago when Dad and I went to that shoe store in Illinois to see the shoes of the tallest man in the world? Mrs. McDonald asked as they turned onto North Broadway in Peru. Yeah. Well, his pants are here. Coke and Pep looked at each other as their dad pulled into the parking lot at Miami County Museum. We came here to see a pair of pants? Coke asked. You gotta be kidding me. Well, they're overalls, actually, Mrs. McDonald replied. They went inside the museum and looked all over for an extremely large pair of overalls. Hey, check this out, Coke said as he spotted a giant skull. Maybe this is that guy's head. In fact, the skull was labeled Big Charlie the Killer Elephant. Apparently, Big Charlie was a circus elephant that got mad at his trainer one day in 1901 and drowned him. Ooh. You know what? We need to be nice to elephants. They're really big. So Big Charlie was shot and his skull was put in the museum and the bullet holes were plainly visible. Oh, that's sad. That's gross, Pep said with obvious fascination. Mrs. McDonald took some photos and notes for Amazing But True, but not far from the giant skull, she found what she was looking for. Feast your eyes, she told the family, and behold, the pants of the tallest man in the world. There's the giant pants. There they were. The pants belonged to Robert Wadlow, the Illinois man whose body produced too much growth hormone. When he was 13 years old, the sign on the wall said, he was 7 feet 4 inches tall. At age 22, he was 8 feet 11 inches tall. That is really tall. I'm not positive on this. This is because I looked it up a long time ago. The average American woman is between 5'4" and 5'6", and they believe that the average American man is between 5'8" and 5'10". So that's average. You're grown up, your parents are probably in that range unless they're exceptionally tall or short. But this guy was 8 feet 11 inches tall. So that would basically be like, I'm trying to think, that's like a 5-year-old on top of a really tall man's head. It's really big. Those are some big pants, Dr. McDonald admitted. That guy must have been some basketball player, Coke marveled. Actually, he could barely stand up, Mrs. McDonald said. He died when he was just 22 in 1940. Oh, that's sad, Pep said quietly. Okay, can we get out of here now, asked Coke. This place is creepy. Mrs. McDonald insisted on stopping in the gift shop before leaving. She gave each of the kids money to get a souvenir. Pep bought a book about circus animals, and Coke bought a can of silly string. By the time the McDonalds got out of the museum, it was afternoon. They still had a long way to go to get through Indiana. So it was quick ham and cheese sandwiches in the RV and back on the road, heading east along Route 24, 35 miles to the town of Huntington. And that's where they saw this sign. Visit the Dan Quayle Vice President Museum. No, Coke hollered from the back. Not another museum. Do we have to go? Asked Pep. I've never even heard of Dan Quayle. Oh, to see, that makes me feel really old, because Dan Quayle was vice president when I was a kid. Calm down, Dr. McDonald told the kids. We're not taking you to another museum. Instead, he pulled into the Tell-High Nature Preserve. The kids assumed they would be observing nature, but Dr. McDonald drove down the road a bit until he stopped in front of a row of little shacks. It's amazing, said Mrs. McDonald. I give up, Cook said. What is it? Back in 1960, Mrs. McDonald informed them, a couple named Hy and Lori Goldenberg bought an outhouse for $3. They liked it so much that they started collecting outhouses. Why? We've seen some people collect some pretty weird stuff in these books, but outhouses? When Hy died, Lori donated 17 of them here. It's probably the largest collection of outhouses in the world. It's probably the only collection of outhouses in the world, Dr. McDonald commented. The outhouses were lined up in a row, and the family examined most of them. One of them seated 3 people at a time, which must have been interesting. Mrs. McDonald took photos and notes. Fascinating, said Dr. McDonald. Let's get out of here. The gravesite of Johnny Appleseed was only 30 miles away near Fort Wayne, but Mrs. McDonald decided to skip it because there is some dispute over where Mr. Appleseed is actually buried. Instead, they headed north on Route 3 to Kendallville, home of the Mid-America Windmill Museum. No, Coke screamed. Not another museum. I'll die if I have to visit another museum. Someday, Dr. McDonald lectured him, wind power, solar power, and other forms of renewable energy will replace coal, oil, and gas. You kids should learn about this stuff. Rogue, be nice. Dr. McDonald had a special interest in the subject, having authored The Impact of Coal on the Industrial Revolution. Can't Pep and I just stay in the RV? Coke begged. Fine, Dr. McDonald said. By the way, time anyone says a sentence that consists of just the word fine, they mean the exact opposite of fine. The situation is not fine, and they are not happy about it. Mrs. McDonald insisted on locking the doors of the RV just to be on the safe side. Don't worry about us, Mom, Coke said. We can take care of ourselves. The grown-ups went off to tour the Windmill Museum. Coke listened to his iPod while Pep worked on a crossword puzzle. After about 15 minutes, she suddenly looked up. I have a bad feeling, she said. Coke took off one earbud so he could hear her. What? Somebody's out there, Pep told him. I have a feeling. They both looked out the windows. Nobody was around, and it was just a parking lot. There were no other vehicles in it. It's nothing, Coke told his sister. You're paranoid. But in fact, it wasn't nothing, because 10 minutes later, a black pickup truck pulled into the parking lot and stopped about 20 yards away. A man wearing a baseball cap got out. Look, Pep shouted. The twins got out of their seat and crept up to the window, keeping their heads low. Is it Archie Clone? Coke asked. No, Pep replied, and it's not one of the bowler dudes either. This guy's too big. I've never seen him before. The guy in the baseball cap rooted around in the back of his truck for about 5 minutes, like he was trying to find something, and then he pulled something out. A chainsaw. He's got a chainsaw! Coke yelled, grabbing his sister. So what? The Didn't you ever see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Coke said. A lunatic named Leatherface murders a bunch of people with a chainsaw. If you are doing this book club, you are too young to watch that movie. I'm too young to watch that movie. Ah! Both twins screamed. The guy with the chainsaw was walking slowly toward the RV. Help! Help! Pep shouted. What are we going to do? We're going to die, moaned Coke. He's going to tear our limbs off. The guy with the chainsaw was getting closer and closer. This is it, Pep said, sobbing uncontrollably. We're trapped in here. There's no way out. It's all over, Cook said, trying his best not to break down. I never thought it would end this way. Oh no, he's almost here. Here he comes. And then the guy with the chainsaw walked past the RV without stopping. He opened the door to a shed on the side of the museum and went inside. Coke and Pep collapsed on the floor, panting and sweating. I guess he's going to cut down a tree, Pep said. Yeah, probably. A few minutes later, their parents came out of the windmill museum. Oh, you kids missed a good time, Mrs. McDonald said. We learned all about windmills. Anything exciting happen while we were gone? Asked Dr. McDonald. Nah, Cook said, except for the psycho who almost attacked us with a chainsaw. You kids crack me up. Dr. and Mrs. McDonald felt a little guilty going to the museum while the kids sat in the RV. Wow, this one is much longer than I thought. They talked it over and agreed that the next day they would do something just for the kids. Oh, this is a great place to stop right here. The McDonald's followed Route 6 out of Kettleville, heading east. After 25 miles, they came to this. Welcome to Ohio! They finally made it to Ohio! And that is a great place for us to stop, even though it's kind of in the middle of a chapter. I believe Griffin is laying on my bookmark. Rogue actually is here now. He decided to come visit. He was actually chewing on my slippers while I was reading. All right, Rogue, say hi. All right, Rogue and I will be back tomorrow to read more and find out about our adventures in Ohio. We finally made it to Ohio. What do you think? I mean, if you were bringing somebody to Ohio for the first time, and they're finding all these cool, weird places in Ohio, throughout the United States to visit, where would you take them in Ohio? We got some really cool stuff in this state, so think about that. Where might you take somebody if they were visiting Ohio for the first time? And we'll catch up with Pep and Coke tomorrow and see where their adventures take them. So we'll see you later. Thanks.